We're all Mavericks.
Welcome to Momish Mavericks.
With your hosts, Maynard and Breslow.
We're Olim and Gayrim.
And we're also entrepreneurs and marketers.
October 7th changed everything,
including the way we do business.
This is the show that realigns your business and goals
with your values and people. Hey everybody, welcome to Momish Mavericks. Today we're joined by Sam Aboudara. Sam is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Director of NJY Camps. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Maynard.
Sam, I appreciate it. I'm really grateful to have you on today. We'll be talking about you, your background, focusing on NJY Camps, talking about youth development, talking about the Jewish community, North America specifically, and Jewish nonprofits in particular. And also talking about nonprofit management. So a lot of cool stuff to talk about here. And we'll get into the crux of it all. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, I always ask all of our guests, where are you based out of today?
So I'm coming to you from northern New Jersey. You might be able to tell from my accent that I'm not a native. I grew up in London.
Are you sure?
Sometimes people think that this is a Brooklyn accent.
You sound like a Jets fan.
But no, I'm definitely a West Ham fan from London. I grew up in the Jewish community there. I've lived in the US for about 12 years now. And I'm at the NJY Camps headquarters in northern New Jersey.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I love it. You know, my wife is from that area right there. I think you're right around the corner from my wife there. Her family's in Montclair. I daven over in Passaic when we're in town. That's right there next to you guys, I believe, right?
Right there. No, it's an area I know well, and it's always fun when you get to play a bit of Jewish geography, right?
Exactly. But obviously your origins being the UK. Tell me a little bit about that journey, right? Obviously being in the US for the last 12 years, but how does a kid like Sam Aboudara end up from the UK and then end up running the Jewish camps in North America?
The real short version is that when I was younger, I was very involved in a Jewish youth movement growing up, Maccabi Great Britain, shout out to them. And they gave me the opportunity to go and coach a summer in the US, coaching soccer. I was a soccer coach, and it was a big passion of mine when I was younger. And that was my first exposure to coming out, working in the States, working in a Jewish camp setting in the States. And I returned back to England after that summer and started studying at university. And that would lead to me working in the full-time setup at Maccabi GB in London. But a few years down the line and a few other things in my life happening, I had this rapport and relationship with the US and with NJY Camps. And there was the opportunity to come out on a sort of short-term work visa and take a camp director position here. And that was about 12 years ago.
Wow. So you've been in the same place for 12 years. That's amazing. Funny enough, you mentioned coming out to the States and doing football camps.
Exactly.
Growing up, before we were religious, I also played soccer. And we used to have these guys coming out. They used to be called British Schalke, and they were just like, these guys were just hilarious, right? They're so funny. I'm not sure did you have some cool gimmicks when you came or stuff, or you just like, we're going to play it cool in regular football over here?
I guess there's that perception when you're an American that people from UK know the sport of soccer better. And so therefore they are more qualified and more reputable coaches. And that's why I think
invent it, right?
I think, yes, I think we technically can stake claims to that it originates from some old mob game of villagers trying to take each other's territory with a pigskin bladder. But yeah, no, it's our sport. We shared it with the world. And certainly with an organization like Maccabi Great Britain, which is both a Jewish engagement organization, but uses sport as a vehicle for that. It was a natural partner for a place like NJY Camps. And yeah, they just had, for many years, they had a relationship where they used to bring out a few soccer coaches to coach at their different camps. And I was a kid involved in that youth movement and given that opportunity. And it really was meant to be a one summer thing. Every summer I was doing kind of different things with Maccabi. That it was an amazing organization to grow up in and be part of their Hadracha, their leadership training program. But that one summer turned into 18 years later, still being involved in this organization, living here, starting a family. I did actually leave NJY Camps for a period of a couple of years and returned in this role as its Chief Operating Officer a couple of years back. So it's been an amazing journey, and it's a place that will always be close to my heart, but continues to be so in a very active way right now.
That's great. So tell me about NJY Camps. Tell me about what you guys are doing and the mission behind it and what you're all about. You've been there for quite a long time.
Yeah, so NJY Camps is a 104-year-old organization. And I think, like the origin of a lot of Jewish summer camps in North America, they all came about within the same period of a couple of decades and ultimately existed to be able to provide these outdoor immersive experiences for Jewish kids that were growing up in the cities and the suburbs to be able to have a real kind of natural experience, to get away from the city and to be able to just have a carefree summer experience as kids. And in many ways, that obviously has evolved. And I think a lot of Jewish camps, especially, view themselves as educational institutions and identity building institutions. I mean, obviously, Zionism plays an important role in that as well. So there's, I think, a lot more ideological emphasis now. But essentially, that's what we exist for. We exist to be able to help thousands, literally thousands of kids each year strengthen their sense of Jewish identity, build Jewish community, and discover themselves in some formal way. It's a great place for kids to be able to develop independence and life skills. And what makes us unique is that we're a cross-denominational organization. So we have a range of different summer camps, and we see kids that are modern Orthodox in terms of their Jewish practice and observance in one of our camps. And then we also see kids that are completely non-denominational, and perhaps coming to our camp in the summer is the only Jewish experience that they might have all year. And so that's a really meaningful type of organizations to be in, where you can see that full range of the Jewish communal landscape.
I love that. And that was one of the things that stuck out to me as well, right? Is I know everybody growing up has memories, and it's such a big thing, right? Growing up, going to camp. But for me, right, it felt like you're only getting one viewpoint, or you're always surrounded by the same people kind of thing. And I would sometimes I grew up going to conservative camps, but then started going to like NCSY and more Orthodox or more modern Orthodox, and it felt like such a different contrast. So that's interesting, right? I guess, how do you feel like that influences the kids, or what do you guys see that does? And is it something where people are separated on there, or they come together certain times, or, hey, here are the camp counselors and can relate to them more and they relate to them more, or is there crossing that as well? I think it's so fascinating that you have so much under one roof. I think it's great.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a tremendous number of Jewish organizations that can speak to the range of observance and practice that we can. To be fair, some of our camps are separate and independent of each other, and some of them are actually an hour and a half away from each other. So the amount of kind of crossover is limited. But I think it all starts at the top. And this is an organization that works out of a little office during the year in North Jersey. And in that office, there's 20 people whose Jewish observance levels, even just the ways that they view the world, politics, Israel, really does run the gamut. We have quite a diverse group of professionals, and yet it's a family. Everyone works tremendously well together. People get into arguments daily, but they get into arguments over what's the right way to do this program, or they get into like business arguments. The one thing that they never fight about is religion or ideology. There's a real shared sense of unity and knowing why we're doing the work that we're doing and how important and impactful it is.
No, I think that's one of the great things. First and foremost, unfortunately, right, when we don't have a reason sometimes to be unified, that sometimes we are choosing or pushed or feel some weird motivation to find faults in others, and they don't do this or they do this. And there's just kind of these things, not to focus on that, but you see what happens in the opposite when, God forbid, what just went through what we're going through since October 7th, and how instantly, like the actus, the unity of Am Yisrael everywhere around the world, no matter who they are, what they believe in and everything, it was just palpable and continues to be palpable. And that's like that energy kind of thing. But it seems like that's already NJY, what you've been doing already, right? This is already built into it in a sense, right? Where I think that's one of the cool things is people working together, even if they don't have too much crossover. As you mentioned, people who are working on it, they get more crossover, and they have to, living with each other and working with each other, so to speak, on decisions and everything like that, what it sounds like, and that's where the common ground is, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You hit on the point that this is a really divisive time, especially in the Jewish community right now. And it's a time that is calling for unity more than ever. And the nature of our organization and the work that we do and the makeup of the people that are part of our community and how wide and diverse that community is, it's really well primed for being able to appreciate and celebrate differences. And I think we always say that we're far more alike than we are different. And I think that's a message maybe for us to be focusing on right now.
100%, always, and especially right now. But that's, I think, our Achilles heel, so to speak. The thing that is always holding us back is that the judgments on each other and looking at each other differently. And it can be within different communities, and even within our own communities. And it's just, that's one of the good things, not good things, but the wake-up calls, like you said, about everything. And obviously here we are, Jewish podcast and Jewish camp, right? So it seems like an obvious answer when I ask, how do your values play into what you're doing? But what's something that may not seem obvious, that is something that your values or something that you hold dear to yourself and that is in alignment with what you're doing and building at NJY Camps?
Oh, that's a great question. I think in some ways that's part of the attraction for people that do the kind of work that I do, working in Jewish nonprofit spaces. You get to be able to work for an organization and an employer that is aligned with your personal values. And I have a lot of friends that work in the for-profit world or in the corporate space, and they work for companies who I'm sure they're very proud to work for, but maybe don't have the same depth and passion for the underlying mission of what they're doing the way that I feel I have. So I don't know if there's something surprising about it. I really just think that I'm privileged that I get to wake up every day and do work that really speaks to my core. And I think there's like a cheesiness to saying that, but there is real truth to it. And that's not to say that it's not without its headaches. There's certainly challenges. And working in this space, working in the youth provision world, taking care of other people's children, trying to run a nonprofit with limited resources, trying to make sure that everyone's kept safe in a time of rising anti-Semitism. These are all like real big headaches and challenges. And sometimes not every day waking up to do this work feels like super energizing. But I think like when you look at it over time, it's a general sense of purpose that I get to feel, meaning. And that's a great kind of thing to be able to dedicate yourself to in work if you have the opportunity, the chance to be able to do that, do work that speaks to you that way.
Exactly. And you mentioned there as well something that I think sounds like you embrace, right? But I think sometimes people will be like, oh, watching other people's children, and that whole dynamic. And it can be like watching those people's children, but as you put it, right, youth development, helping other people's children develop and having a positive influence on them. And it's much more than just like a babysitting thing. That's something that these kids remember forever. Really, they remember this forever. It's something that impacts them. And I guess tell me a little bit about that youth development that goes into it and like your personal goal that you try to give over as a CEO over there and what you're doing, or perhaps what you try to do as a whole and personally as well.
Yeah, I think the idea of thinking of ourselves as youth development organizations and causes is at the crux of it. I think if we limit ourselves to just thinking about the work that we're doing as childcare, then I think we're underrepresenting the potential that comes from this work. And anyone that works in the camp space, whether it's in the nonprofit or Jewish camp space or any kind of summer camp, knows that it is a powerful experience that has the potential to change lives. And it does so in these like subtle ways where, thousands of moments a day are shaping and molding young people's sense of self. And you don't really get that in any other kind of experience that you have when you're growing up. You don't see that in your home or in school or in an extracurricular activity, but it's what happens when you put a group of people together in a 24/7 environment, have them engaged with people that are relatable and have this kind of wholesome environment that is surrounded by nature and filled with values, and a program that is ultimately designed to be fun. Everything about camp is meant to be fun. And if the program that you're offering, if there's elements of it that are boring, then you're missing something. And I think that kids learn best when they're doing, and they learn best when they're enjoying themselves. And that's what camp is all about. So camp as a construct has a really important role in North America, especially, and in particular, the Jewish community. And I think it's because it does a lot more than just take care of kids and give their parents an opportunity to be without them in the summer. I think what it does is shape them into the young people that they're growing into and help them figure out themselves.
Yeah, and obviously that's one of the main things, is making it fun. You think you're trying to sell the parents, but really it's the kids are the ones that you got to really sell, because they're the ones that are like oh, I hated that place. I'm never going back there. Or they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for next year. Oh my gosh, NJY, I can't wait. I love it there. And I think that seems like a real challenge. Just even like here in my community where October 7th, I live in Israel. So October 7th happens and schools are shut down and people don't know how to react. And we really just leaned into each other. And when the school was down, some of the parents are like, hey, I think the kids need to get out of the house and they need something to give them something during the day. And so kids started going to like other kids' houses or other families' houses, right? And I don't have an adolescent, or I have a almost 2-year-old. I had a group of 6 to 8-year-olds, and then I had a group of 13 to 16-year-olds, right? And you have to really think, what do they want to do? What can we do that makes them fun, that's going to be engaging, that's going to be meaningful, that's going to be something that can teach them lessons, but at the same time, it's not going to be like a drag and, oh my God, that kind of thing, which I feel like that energy comes in a lot. Tell me about how maybe that's changed. One of the things that we see so much in the world, and it affects our communities as well, is this. I'm an ADHD kid. I grew up with all kinds of stimuli going on and everything. And these kids, so many of them, across the spectrum, and the religious ones as well, right? They have a lot of stuff going on and stimuli, and they seem to have different levels of attention and different things that they want, that they feel is fun, right? So how is that going to change for you in the last 12 years? Were you seeing, oh man, like this stuff's kind of changed, or this stuff used to work and doesn't work anymore? And maybe what are some of the things that you guys are doing that you feel is unique as opposed to other places that you guys have been able to develop in that regard the last 12 years?
I mean, I think that the state of youth development is probably always evolving, because the environment around us and the conditions in which young people are growing up in is rapidly changing. That there's a lot of big themes that we could pick, whether it's the proliferation of technology and the reliance upon it that we see young people with, whether it's the mental health epidemic that I think we're seeing young people live through right now, and how there needs to be so many more supports available for young people growing up, and especially in these kinds of youth-serving spaces like schools and camps. And then obviously for the Jewish community, we have our own sets of themes, whether it's everything post-October 7th, that is a watershed moment. And you said you're in Israel, and our hearts go out to our community that is having to live through this war and this terribly difficult time. We have a lot of staff, a lot of kids that come from Israel each summer, and we're looking forward to welcoming them back this year. But whatever those topics are, they inform ultimately the way that we provide care and the way that we program. And going back to your point in terms of some of the big things that have changed, I think that focus on mental health is one that I would, draw upon for sure. We have invested a lot more resources into providing additional mental health supports to not just our campers, but our staff as well. They need it as much, if not more. We were fortunate from a partnership in our state here with the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey to be able to hire a dedicated full-time mental health professional who works year-round, working with parents, working with different partner agencies to run different workshops, and then ultimately overseeing the way that we provide mental health care during the summer. So I think that's like a big way in which things have changed. And then making sure in a Jewish organization today, even before October 7th, but absolutely since, the security and safety of people is paramount. We've been putting a lot of time and resources into making sure that we have heightened security measures, deterrents, and making sure that getting access into our property is much harder than it would have been before. Those are things that I think we're focusing on. I don't know that those are necessarily the fun things to talk about. So I'll try and think of one as well that kind of really talks about how we program for kids. Because in many ways,
but it's serious. This is so serious. It really is. And I'm glad you bring that up. It's really a serious thing, mental health. And I'll be honest, that's one of the main reasons that I moved from America. I'm 37. I made the decision when I was 16, 17 that I was not going to raise my kids in America. And I just kind of thought, not even religious, not for any reason like that, not anything. Israel wasn't even on the list at the time. I was like, maybe like Vancouver or like Mexico somewhere, or just somewhere away from, I'm from LA, where I'm like, I felt so lucky and blessed that like I got out, and at times it felt I was walking the tightrope or walking on the fence. I can fall this way or fall that way, and very different outcomes for sure. But I think It's really, really sad what a lot of the kids are going through these days. And it's not just an American problem, it's also in Israel, obviously, but it's something that definitely snowballed from what I've seen from when I'm growing up and was 10 years ago and what now. And everybody's got a theory. All of a sudden, everybody's a PhD and is an expert on it and everything like that. But you're there, kids, you're spending the entire summer with them away from their families, which brings some negatives where they out of their routines and missing their families, but maybe some positives as well, where they're out of maybe certain social roles, whatever it may be, or whatever it is. But you see them in the raw form with them for that long, and they're
Yeah.
COO and the executive director. You get to really have, like you said, develop in such a way. What is it that you think, in your expertise and your experience, that's really happened? Is it that there's more awareness of mental health? Is everybody thinks that there's agendas being pushed and obviously social media? So a combination of all or something else? Just from your viewpoint, can you help me out with that one?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you have a lot of experience. So share with me, what are your views? How behind this increase or in mental health issues, decrease in mental health in general? Everybody has the theories that social media obviously plays such a part. And
Yeah.
maybe there's an emphasis on mental health so much that people are like finding reasons or agendas being pushed or whatever people think as theories. You get to have really your ear to the ground with kids year in, year out. So
Yeah.
tell me, based on your views, what's behind there?
Yeah, I think that I'll start by saying that while I've dedicated my career to working around children, I'm not a mental health professional or a psychologist. Actually, my wife is.
Yeah, for sure.
She would answer this in a far more astute way. But I would say from my experience and from my vantage point, I think there are probably things that we could look at that we might describe as a negative driver of this. And then I think there's also the positive drivers. On the negative side, you referenced it yourself, we could definitely talk about the impact of social media and the impact of devices that children are getting younger and younger. We could talk about how easily accessible adult topics are to children now and the availability of the internet at a much younger age and the rise of instant gratification. And in many ways, these could all be things that play a role in that. On the positive side, I think we could also talk about the fact that in many ways, as a society, we have destigmatized mental health. We've made it something that we talk about more. We've made resources for supporting mental health, both around therapeutic access and medication, and that stuff is a lot more available and there's a lot more attention given to it. And some might argue that these mental health conditions have always existed and always been prevalent. We've just not been able to talk about them. And we've not been able to know how to diagnose them and how to support them. I think it's probably a combination of both, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know, and you bring up great points there. And it's just something that I think is so important when obviously our children are our future, right? We do everything for them. And this is just like the main thing. When God was giving us the Torah, it said it's not for you, it's for your kids. And this is the guarantee that the kids, no matter what it is, there's a new generation and we are investing in our children and we're investing in their education and we are doing what we need to do to ensure that they have a better life. So it's really something that is the most important thing. And sending kids to a camp like this is investing in their future and is something that is so important.
No, I will say that in many ways you were getting to it, but camp is the antidote to that. Camp is the space that allows kids to be themselves. And when you ask me about things that have changed, one of the things that hasn't changed is the focus on camp being a stripped down, disconnected, when I say disconnected technology-wise, uber connected socially and emotionally. But camp is that space where we often hear children and staff talk about how they get to be their real self at camp. Camp's a place where what you're wearing doesn't matter, what technology you have doesn't matter. We're a screen-free environment, and a lot of camps are still maintaining that. And actually, we had an uphill battle trying to do that many years ago. Not even that many years ago, but not so many years ago. It was tough to try, and I think we're finding it easier and easier. I think people are looking for that. They're looking for immersive environments. And Camp offers that. So when you talk about some of the impacts of social media or smartphones, Camp's a great space for being able to take that stuff away and let kids just be kids. And if you ask any of my colleagues, there's a couple in particular who are social workers by trade, and one who spent many years working in the public school world and supporting high schoolers transitioning to college. She'll tell you that those young people that have gone to camp and learned independence and learned communal living and learned all of the life skills that summer camp gives you, they fare a lot better in college. They do a lot better once they are outside of the nest. And so camp does so much, yeah.
No, and I love that too. I think is one of the biggest points, right, is you always hear, oh, go outside. And, oh, when I was your age, I used to play so much more. And everybody is crammed inside. And that's like the whole point. Right? That's the whole point. This is the perfect opportunity. That's why I think I love Shabbos, because it's like such an incredible time to disconnect. I mean, it's so much more than that. 25 hours, it's like the best thing ever. Otherwise, I would keep going. Why would I have any reason to stop? And it's just, that's like that. Imagine having that for all that time. You have adults who spend so much money. It's like a whole nother thing, right? Where people go and they have silence retreats and all these kind of things, like all these kind of gimmicks to just get away. And it's like, how about silence? How about no social media for, you can be not talking and be on social media all day, and it's probably not going to be that beneficial. But I think that's so great, where you like a screen-free place for so much time, where it is like a detox in a certain way, and you are learning skills that you wouldn't normally have. And I think that in of itself is such a boost for mental health and emotional health and everything else that goes along with it. So I love that. I mean,
I think there is a real fear with this kind of youngest generation right now that they're not going to learn some of the basic interpersonal skills that go with relationship building and with social emotional regulation, because the conditions that they're growing up in just aren't conducive for teaching that. It's like when you no longer are learning handwriting in school because everything you're doing on a keyboard, you don't know how to write. I think it's the same idea in a much more kind of deeper level, that when you're living in a space where you don't have to interact and communicate in person as much as you would have generations ago, you're losing the skills that are necessary for being able to do that well. And camp, I think, is one of the few opportunities out there, maybe not, I think there are many, but I think camp is the richest, or camp is the one that does it in the most heightened way. It's teaching those soft skills that otherwise we risk this next generation not having the same tools that their generation before had.
No, exactly. But you said right as well, we look at sometimes as a negative way, and kids, even though it seems like their mental health they seem to be very sensitive to each other, and their emotional intelligence, I think, is something that is very different from years before, where people are just, I guess, a little bit more thoughtful of their interactions with each other. And maybe it's not a blanket statement or generalized, but it's just something that I've noticed. But it's something that I think is part of what you're doing, and it's a great thing for sure. Now, obviously, it's not just about youth development, but what also is unique when talking about NJY specifically, as you mentioned, people from across the religious spectrum there in the camp and everything. But in general, managing a nonprofit is different than having a for-profit. We're mentioning, obviously, what it is different in terms of where you have the ability to maybe be in more alignment with your views, as you mentioned earlier. But I'm sure that brings with it a lot of other kind of unique opportunities, so to speak. So talk to me a little bit about what it's like managing a nonprofit and how that may be different from other forms of business, and what that experience has been like for you.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at Jewish summer camps as nonprofit organizations, that's, I think, been an emerging trend for us, is focusing on the best practices that are needed to be able to run an organization with efficiency and with professionalized systems in ways that I think in previous decades perhaps wasn't the necessary focus. I think a lot of the people that once did this work were people where there was a much greater focus on social work and educators and people that understood how to work with people. And while that is still a critically important part of our work, there's also it's much more challenging to run nonprofit organizations now. Resources are limited. The labor market is challenging. There's so much that goes into doing the work that we do that falls outside of what we typically think of when you think of being someone who works for a summer camp. You tend to think of, okay, so our work is taking care of children, communicating with parents, hiring staff, training them, and designing great program experiences. But you also have to market your services, and you have to raise money for them, and you have to manage your budget, and you have to understand how to operate a wastewater treatment plant, and you have to understand how the permitting process works in your township, and you have to understand the kind of insurance coverage that you need and the compliance pieces that you have to adhere to, and how to navigate a board of directors that are volunteers and have appropriate governance structure, and how to have an HR info. And I could keep going on, but that I think has been an area that we've certainly been focusing on more so in recent years, is really trying to not just run great camps that take care of people and provide these transformative experiences, but also run a best practice nonprofit organization that has all of the measures that's required for that: transparency, efficiency, and just general kind of good business operations.
No, and that's definitely, a whole laundry list of stuff there. It's actually fascinating because I've actually never worked in a nonprofit myself. I was growing up and on for-profit, obviously, and different kinds of businesses. Do you feel like with nonprofits, you may have more freedom as opposed to for-profit or big corporation or anything like that?
I think it depends. I think when you work for a nonprofit, you're responsible for something that's larger than yourself, because ultimately you are stewarding communal money. Our CEO likes to say this all of the time, that we're stewards of communal money. And with that comes a tremendous sense of responsibility. We have a group of stakeholders that are on board, and they are fiduciaries, which means that they have a legal responsibility to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate and ethical and responsible. So in some ways that removes the idea of freedom or flexibility, but it creates checks and balances, to use like the American political framework. It creates the necessary checks and balances to ensure that you are doing things in the right way. I guess if you are working for a smaller privately owned summer camp, it might come with a little bit more freedom and flexibility to make some of those discretionary choices. But that's not to say that that there isn't autonomy in our world as well. And we're a small enough organization that we can provide a tremendous amount of autonomy to our staff and the people that are running our programs. And ultimately, the whole administration side of the work that we do, of having an accounting department and raising money and having streamlined operations, all of that stuff exists to be able to free up the professionals that run our camps, our camp directors, to be able to do what they do best, which is work with families, develop amazing program experiences, engage children, and hire staff. And so in that regard, that's what I see as the work that I do in my role, is to try and help make sure that they have the systems and the structures necessary to be able to have the freedom and scope to be creative and to do their work.
That's great. And yeah, definitely a lot of constrictions there. But you mentioned as well marketing, right? So I guess how does that differ as well? And what challenges are there with kind of marketing nonprofit Jewish camp? And also on this flip side, what positive things do you feel like you've been able to do there with NJY to bring more eyeballs? And talk to me a little bit about it. It's a unique kind of situation.
Oh, sure. Yeah. In many ways, this is like a big buzz topic for us right now, because one of the things our team has been focusing on a lot the last year or so is raising the profile of this organization, the work that we do. We got to go through the cool thing of recently going through a rebrand and a newly redesigned website. We launched all of that few months ago, and that's been really exciting. And we've also been trying to have a bigger voice in the community and be more than just a summer camp. Part of our challenge is we're trying to educate our audience that we're more than just a place that takes care of kids and provides them with a wholesome and safe experience, but that we are a worthy cause, that we are a place that is molding Jewish identity for future generations. And that is worthy of philanthropic investment from donors and from grant makers. So one of the things that we've been able to do is get some good exposure. We had this past summer, we had, I guess, 2 of the big national papers ran stories of ours. We had a New York Times front page article about our year-round mental health professional, Heather. And it was an amazing piece. A journalist who followed her for 2 or 3 days, documented everything that's going on and spoke about the necessary supports that mental health professionals provide kids right now. We also had a Washington Post article this past summer that came from a photojournalist who followed a specific group of girls as they aged through 3 consecutive summers at camp and looked at the way that camp has a real important impact on their lives. She went to all of their it was an amazing kind of story, and she's producing a kind of coffee table book off the back of it, but it was picked up by the Washington Post. And I guess to top it off, we also had the vice president's husband, the second gentleman of the US, Doug Emhoff, who's a principal in the White House. He happens to be an alum of ours, and our chief development officer had been trying to connect with his team for the last couple of years to engage him, and we were able to get him to come and visit. So we played host to the White House and Secret Service this past summer, which was like a crazy experience, but also a lot of fun. So between all of those things, we got obviously some great press and we got some new eyeballs on NJY Camps. But in many ways, that's the kind of the momentum that we're looking to continue building is how to elevate this organization and get it out in the community, because we know that the work that we do is so important, and there's no shortage of studies that show that Jewish overnight camp is one of the most important drivers of long-term Jewish outcomes. We just want to get more people in and have more people be part of our community. These types of efforts have really helped us.
No, I love that for sure. And that's one of the things that stood out first and foremost here. So anywhere, wherever you were, there's obviously such a worthy cause and such an important thing. If you're in the position over here with NJY Camps, it's amazing what they're doing for sure. But that's one of the things that stood out for me as well when I was doing some research here on you and what you're doing was the website really stood out. It really looked, I don't know what it looked like before, but that was one of the things that really popped to me, right? So this investment of the rebrand, obviously, and elevating that brand where it may seem like, oh, what does it matter? We're a camp. People are going to get to us because they word of mouth and they don't really need that. And I'm always like, that's maybe the case, or it may have been the case, but things are always changing. And it's so important to have that. You want to be the top camp. You got to look like the top camp, even if you know you for years and people don't know you, they can't find you. How can they send their kids there? How can they donate to you? So that's definitely so important to have that, because I'm sure you guys have been doing such a great job already. It's like upgrading the look to match already what you guys are doing behind the scenes, obviously. And sometimes that's what's lacking or lagging a little bit, right? So, and obviously PR, mentioning those write-ups and the stuff and getting the name out there and getting blasts and being able to reach people that never heard about you. And now all of a sudden you're on their radar. So that's incredible as well.
Yeah, in many ways, it's necessary work of building any brand or building any business is you have to get eyes on you, and you have to be able to do things that are creative. So yeah, it's definitely something that we've been focusing on because, like I said, we believe that the work that we're doing is super important, but that work is only as good as the people who know about it.
Yeah, amazing. And you're talking about keeping the momentum going. That's one of the big things. Getting in the pub and maintaining that attention and being like, hey, don't forget over here, and keeping that ball rolling. What do you guys have in place for that? Or what are you guys wanting to do? What's next on the docket for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always planning. We definitely got some things that we're thinking about. We have a couple of different fundraising events that we're focused on in the spring that we're hoping to both bring existing donors, but also new supporters. We have a lot of creative people behind our fundraising and development efforts. So we're trying to find ways to engage people, especially people who are alumni or who are connected in the community, and finding ways to re-engage them in our work that they do and show that there is still a relevant place for NJY camps in their lives and something that they can do to support our work. And then, like you said, just continued PR efforts. We have an amazing team of talented professionals who do the work of running these camps, and they're experts in their own right. And something we've been trying to do is get our team writing more often, because in many ways they're thought leaders, and some of the things that sit in their heads are things that would be interesting for other people to read. And the more that we can position them in that way and let them have a voice and share it with an audience, you never know what doors that might open up and what people that might bring to us who might be interested in our work and might want to support it or know about us, even just to send their kids here. So I think it's a lot of the same work that we want to continue doing. Yeah, I can't really think of anything in particular beyond that.
And it's definitely an ongoing thing. And as you mentioned, youth development is always evolving, even in the best of times, worst of times. These are the things, and the same thing with marketing and getting eyeballs, fundraising. They change all the time. It's like what was working 3 years ago, all of a sudden, it's like, why are we falling deaf ears all of a sudden, not getting callbacks or responses or open rates or whatever it may be, or not many people showing up. And may think, oh, it's economy. That may be, but philanthropy is obviously Sadaka, everything is one of the main pillars of what we do as a people. So there's always, it's always there to tap into God's help and with the right strategies.
Yeah, the last thing I'd say on it is that I think most importantly, what we want to keep doing is just doing our fundamental work really well, like running excellent camp, because ultimately everything else that we do is secondary to that. And we can market ourselves brilliantly, and we can solicit lots of donors, and we can build a great website, and we can do all of this stuff. But if the underlying service that we're offering wanes and isn't the best version of what it should be, none of that really matters. So I really think that in some ways it's a bit of a purist way of looking at things, but we're just trying to do our fundamental work right, and just making sure that we are investing our time and our resources in taking care of children, in providing rich educational experiences, in training and inspiring young adults who make up our staff population. That's the real work of our agency. And I think when we do that, it provides limitless opportunity for all the other stuff that we have going on as well.
No, I think that's a given. I think that's the main thing, right? Like that's the meat and potatoes. That's not the dressing, because ultimately you can have the best campaigns and the best money, and then the kids come for 1 year and they're like, oh my God, that was horrible, and it's over. So of course, but I think that's specifically been there for 12 years. You said minus a cup stint away for a little bit. So I would say that's, I'm sure, always been the focus. And that's why I'm saying maybe the website is exciting, because it was like, oh, it wasn't getting much love for a long time. It was just like there and whatever. It's something that, like, because you're focusing so much on the kids, and that's the important thing, the programs and what's going on, that sometimes it's the other stuff can get lost in the shuffle that is also important. It's great to hear that. Of course, that's the focus. So I love that for sure. Now, tell our listeners how they can find you and NJY Camps, connect with you personally, and donate or find out for their kids how to get them involved.
Yeah, the real simple place is njycamps.org. That's the hub to everything. All of our team's contact information is on there. There's ways to support our work and donate through there, and information about each of our different camps that we run and the type of programming that we're all about.
Amazing. Yeah, easy. And now it's upgraded, a new skin over here. And I've always said I've been doing this for a long time, right? I've seen a lot of really bad products that have beautiful packaging, and then you try and you're like, oh my gosh. But there's a lot more people trying the bad products with good packaging and good marketing, unfortunately, than those amazing packages, those amazing products that don't sit down on the shelf, or they don't have aren't in your face all the time. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. So it's imperative to have both. Otherwise, you're not going to get people coming back over and over again. But that's amazing. So everybody go check out njycamps.org. Great place. You'll see the link here wherever you're listening or watching podcasts. Now, before I let you go, is there anything else exciting in regards to NJY Camps, or anything you want to share with us and our audience?
I don't know. You've given us such an amazing platform. This wasn't ever meant to be anything self-promotional here. Like I said, I think it's just that we really believe in the work that we're doing. We think that it plays a critical role in the Jewish community, and any opportunity we have to get to talk about it and share our story is always a real privilege.
Amazing. You are doing great work. That's the humility that comes along with it, right? It's about, as you mentioned, right, the doing the great programs and putting your head down and figuring out how we can make the kids love what we're doing and everything like that, it almost feels weird to promote yourself, but that's what you need to do as well. So it's great, and definitely been a pleasure for sure to have you on. Now, before I let you go, I got to ask everybody, tell me what your definition of success is, whether it be personally, professionally, spiritually, or otherwise. Tell me what a success looks for you, Sam.
Success for me personally is being able to go home to my family. I have 2 young daughters. They're 2 and 4, so obviously they don't care about anything that daddy does for work. Success for me is being able to go home to them and my wonderful wife, and for them to be proud of me and be excited to see me.
That's it. That's the reason we do everything, right? It's like I always say, listen, I do this. I love what I do, but would spend a lot more. I would love my family. I do this for them. I do it for them, and I'm grateful to be able to be right here at home, and my son's sleeping next door, and he can come in and carve out that time to see him. That's the most important thing, everything. So for sure, what's more successful than a man who's happy to go home and happy to shalom bayis and great relationships and being the great example and leader. So I'd love to hear that for sure, Sam. It's been such a pleasure to have you on. I'm really grateful for you, for your time. Been really grateful for everybody, wherever you are. And we're going to keep coming out with great content like Sam here. So really appreciate all of you. And once again, Sam, so you should be zoiche really to see that the work that you're doing is having such a huge impact on the kids that you interact with, on your coworkers and the people that depend on you, and that you're going to feel so good really knowing that you are a vessel, a conduit for the donations and everything, and knowing that it's going the right place. And this way, you're going to see not only that grow, but more success with yourself and at home, with shalom bayis, and love and connection with your daughters in the very best way, with help and with happiness. So all the best to you.
All right. Amen.
Very good. So cool. Good luck to you. The rest of the year and beyond. All the best.